The galaxy had long forgotten Earth. To the proud empires of the core, humanity was little more than a wandering people, stubborn survivors clinging to the shadows of greater civilizations. The Koran dynasties forged fleets of living metal that sang through the void. The Shalari bent physics itself with their resonance drives, their ships moving as if time were merely a suggestion. And humanity? Humanity welded scrap, patched hulls with duct tape and prayer, and fueled their journeys with nothing but instinct and stubbornness. And yet, against all reason, they endured. Admiral Elias Wu was a product of that endurance. His flagship, the Resolute Dawn, was not the newest vessel in the Coalition fleet. By alien standards, it wasn't even fit for frontline duty. Its hull bore scars from asteroids, pirates, and desperate repairs done in the dark of space. But Wu trusted this ship more than any polished alien cruiser. It was battered but alive. And Wu knew something the counselors had long forgotten. Alive things fight hardest when cornered. When the first system vanished, the great powers barely noticed. Stars flickered out sometimes, black hole collapses, quantum anomalies. Nature had teeth. But when a whole civilization disappeared, no distress calls, no debris, not even the light of the sun itself, the galaxy could no longer look away. Alien fleets were dispatched. None returned. So the Council assembled a coalition, a fleet of their best ships led by a human, a gesture, some whispered, of futility. Others called it mockery. Admiral Wu did not ask why. He only nodded when the appointment was given. Humanity had lived through mockery before. It didn't matter who laughed. It only mattered who survived. The bridge of the Resolute Dawn hummed with tension as the fleet approached the silent system. Alien officers moved with practiced grace, their eyes flicking toward Wu with restrained distaste. "Admiral Wu," came the smooth voice of the translator node. "Counselor Veralix requests a reminder that improvisation will not be tolerated. The Coalition has planned this mission with precision." Wu did not turn. He didn't need to. He could picture Veralix perfectly, scaled, towering, her golden ceremonial armor gleaming. Her slit-pupiled eyes would be narrow with disdain, her claws flexing in barely contained impatience. "Tell Veralix," Wu said, his tone as dry as a desert, "that I'll do my best not to improvise, unless reality insists otherwise." A soft chuckle echoed from behind him. Dr. Thalin Kioro, the Shalari overseer, tilted his tall, crested head. His bioluminescent markings pulsed faintly, betraying amusement. "Your kind," Thalin mused, "always speaks as though reality is something to wrestle. Most species adapt to the universe. Human, distorted until it breaks." Wu finally glanced back, the faintest of smiles tugging at his lips. "Funny. That's exactly why we're still here." And so the uneasy coalition sailed onward, toward a system already silent. Lieutenant Aron Voss was not silent. The hangar echoed with his voice as he traded jokes with a Shalari technician, the kind with too many eyes and not enough patience. "Your ship," the technician muttered, "is held together by luck and arrogance." "Good thing I've got both in spades," Voss grinned, patting the battered fuselage of his fighter. The engine gave a protesting groan as if to agree. Moments later, his comm crackled. "Lieutenant Voss, bridge." Now Voss straightened instantly. He jogged onto the bridge, helmet tucked under one arm, posture sharp. Admiral Wu's gaze fixed on him with the weight of a neutron star. "You disobeyed orders last drill," Wu said, his voice flat, eyes unreadable. Voss opened his mouth, then thought better of it. He squared his shoulders. "Sir, I saw an opening. If it had been real—" "It wasn't real," Wu cut him off. "And out here, one reckless move will get you killed, and everyone else with you. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," Voss said quickly, though his jaw clenched. Thalen's voice slid between them like smoke. Fascinating. A species that survives by recklessness, chastising its own for recklessness. Wu didn't look away from Voss. Stay out of this, Doctor. And you, his voice sharpened, will follow orders. You'll have your chance to prove yourself. Until then, discipline keeps us alive, not bravado. Yes, sir, Voss repeated, quieter this time. But even as he said it, Wu could see the fire in the boy's eyes. He would not hold back when the moment came. And perhaps, Wu thought grimly, that fire might be the one thing they would need. The fleet emerged at the edge of the system. Darkness, planets that should have gleamed with city lights hung lifeless. No signals, no heat signatures, no debris fields. It was as if the system had never lived at all. Varalix hissed, her scales shifting as she loomed over the hollow table. No empire could erase itself so completely. This reeks of cowardice. They must have fled. Perhaps, Wu said quietly. His eyes narrowed as the resolute dawn sensors flickered. Or perhaps something erased them. Dr. Thalen's bioluminescence dimmed, his expression unreadable. There are distortions in the quantum lattice, gravity behaving incorrectly, as though space itself has been consumed. Voss leaned forward before he could stop himself. Consumed? By what? Do not speak out of turn, child, Varalix snapped, her tail lashing. But Wu raised a hand. No, let him ask. He's right to be concerned, his gaze fixed on Thalen. Define consumed. The alien's eyes, black and endless, met Wu's. I cannot. The data should not exist. It is as though the system has been swallowed whole. Silence pressed on them like a weight, and then, before orders could be given, a lone signal cut through the static. Planets that should have gleamed with city lights hung lifeless. No signals, no heat signatures, no debris fields. It was as if the system had never lived at all. Varalix hissed, her scales shifting as she loomed over the hollow table. No empire could erase itself so completely. This reeks of cowardice. They must have fled. Perhaps, Wu said quietly. His eyes narrowed as the resolute dawn sensors flickered. Or perhaps something erased them? Dr. Thalen's bioluminescence dimmed, his expression unreadable. There are distortions in the quantum lattice, gravity behaving incorrectly, as though space itself has been consumed. Voss leaned forward before he could stop himself. Consumed? By what? Do not speak out of turn, child, Varalix snapped, her tail lashing. But Wu raised a hand. No, let him ask. He's right to be concerned. His gaze fixed on Thalen. Define consumed. The alien's eyes, black and endless, met Wu's. I cannot. The data should not exist. It is as though the system has been swallowed whole. Silence pressed on them like a weight, and then before orders could be given, a lone signal cut through the static. Launch fighters, Wu ordered, voice sharp as steel. Form a screen around him. Now, Varalix snarled. This is madness. He disobeyed orders. Let him fall. Not on my watch, Wu snapped. And so, with engines screaming and weapons charging, the Coalition fleet moved for the first time against the Devourer. And so the Coalition moved as one, too slowly for a rescue, too quickly for comfort, into the shadow of a thing that was not a fleet, not a storm, not a god, but something worse, a hunger that learned. Screen is forming, called the Shalari flight controller, frills quivering, vectoring interceptors to Lieutenant Voss. Hold your line, Admiral Elias Wu said, voice low and taut. He needs a corridor, not a dog pile. On the screen, Aron Voss's fighter bucked through invisible tides. The darkness followed like spilled ink in water. No thrusters, no emissions, just a wrongness that bent light around it. Talk to me, Lieutenant, Wu said. Give me anything you can read. Voss's breath came fast over comms. Sir, radiation isn't spiking. Energy drain, yes, but it's selective? My reactor output is normal until they look at it. Thalen Kioro's markings dimmed. Observer effect? Weaponized? Then we'll blind it, Wu said. Helm, flare pattern delta, on my mark. Fighters, dump static and chaff. Varalix's growl coiled through the translator. You are gambling with untested responses. Wu didn't look at her. Mark! The black of space exploded in noise and light. Decoy flares bloomed and died. Charge clouds fizzed like powder in rain. For a heartbeat, the shadows lost cohesion, edges fraying. Corridor open, the flight controller barked. Voss, now! Voss's fighter rolled, an impossible knife edge through turbulence, and punched toward the gap. The shadow nearest him reacted too late. It reached, missed, and collapsed like smoke in a downdraft. Welcome home, Wu said, letting out the breath he hadn't realized he held. Voss's laugh was half sob, half triumph. Copy that, Admiral. Bringing you homework, dock and debrief, Wu said. Then find the person who signed off on your flight certification and buy them a drink, because I won't. Understood, sir. And so, by brazen instinct and a handful of flares, a human pilot slipped the jaws of something that had never needed jaws before. The debriefing chamber felt too small. Voss sat straight in his flight suit, helmet on the table, knuckles white against the carbon weave. Thalen stood over a projection of Voss's telemetry, symbols crawling like living script. Varalix took the far corner, less a person than a verdict given form. Your craft's systems behaved until the moment of observation, Thalen said, voice thoughtful. When the entity oriented toward you, entropy at your reactor interface rose abruptly, but only at the interface. Localized, intentional Voss tried for levity and failed. So it looked at me funny and my engine got shy. It learned you existed, Thalen corrected, and then it applied learning. Wu folded his hands. Does it act on every observation? No, Thalen said. It is selective. It chose the most catastrophic pathway with minimal effort. Elegant in its cruelty, Varalix's eyes narrowed. You mean efficient. Cruelty implies purpose. This is predation, Voss glanced at Wu. Sir, permission to be reckless in a controlled way? Wu arched a brow. That is not a phrase. I want to go out again, Voss said quickly, with a tether and a sacrificial power bank. If we can trigger its look on something we control, maybe we can understand the mechanism. Find a way to make it look at the wrong thing. Thalen's crest flared. He is proposing to distract it with bait. Bait works, Voss said. Ask any fish. Varalix's tail thumped the deck. We do not endanger resources for a human experiment. It already endangered our resources, Wu said, still calm. Lieutenant's suggestion has merit. We need a controllable stimulus. Then use drones, Varalix snapped. Drones don't improvise, Wu said. An improvisation counselor appears to be our only advantage. Silence pressed. For once, Varalix did not reply. Thalen inclined his head. I will design the tether and the sacrificial bank. If this fails, Admiral, we will lose a pilot. Wu's eyes were flint. If we do nothing, Doctor, we will lose a galaxy. And so the coalition voted, with grim stares and reluctant nods, to let a human dance with darkness again. They launched at ship midnight. The tactical display cast long shadows over the bridge. Voss's fighter trailed a cable of braided superconductors behind it. An umbilical to a coffin-sized power bank bolted to a disposable hull. Tiny drones flitted around him like minnows around a shark. Telemetry green, Voss reported. Bank charged. Tether stable. Keep your vector shallow, Wu said. If the tether snaps, you break off. No heroics. Heroics are just accidents that look good, Voss said. Copy. No accidents. Thalen's voice was quiet. activating sacrificial output in 3, 2, 1. The power bank flared on Voss's scopes, a soft sun in a box. In the distance, shadow congealed. I have attention, Voss whispered. It seized the bank. Hold, Wu said. We need the curve. The shadow bent toward the bait, and the numbers bent with it. Heat death accelerated where there should have been surge. Current bled into nothing at the interfaces. Always the interfaces. Local entropy elevation at the boundary, Thalen murmured. It doesn't drain the thing. It drains the relationship between things. Like cutting every rope on a ship at once, Wu said. The sails are fine. The mast is fine. But nothing is tied to anything, Voss swallowed. It's unbuilding connections. Sir, what if we tie it to the wrong thing? Wu turned slowly. Explain. If it picks what to unmake, we give it a choice that hurts. We attach the bank to, I don't know, a live star filament or a gravity pinch. If it looks there, it breaks the wrong rope and yanks on itself, Varalix hissed. Madness. Thalen's bioluminescence brightened in fascination. Or genius. A topological snare. With what we have, Wu said. No miracles. Thalen looked back at the readings. We can attempt a micro pinch with the star's corona. Dangerous. If it fails, we lose the bank, and our fighter Voss's grin returned. Thin but real. I've lost worse at cards. Do it, Wu said. And so they did what humans always did. They tied a knot in a storm and dared lightning to choose the wrong path. The sacrificial bank drifted, tether humming. Tiny drones unspooled a filament of borrowed star wind, frail and furious, to kiss the bank's casing. Space sang in Voss's bones through the hull. The shadow reached, hungry. Now, Wu said. Thalen collapsed 2 field lines with a whisper of math. The filament snapped to the bank. Connection forged. The Devourer looked. Reality stuttered. For an instant, heat and light and gravity forgot how to be separate chores and tried to be the same job. The bank detonated without flame or shock, an inside-out collapse that rang like a bell too large to hear. The shadow recoiled, edges shredding like torn silk, then flowed backward into itself, reorganizing. Voss whooped. It didn't like that. Wu's hands were steady again. We found a pain receptor. Not pain, Thalen said, awe in his voice. An avoidance gradient. It learns and reconfigures, then learn faster, Wu said. We need to do this at scale. Varalix's glare could have cut hull. You are proposing to weaponize stars. Wu finally turned to meet her eyes. Counselor, our enemy already weaponizes absence. Choose your horror. And so the first semblance of a plan, a human plan, stole breath from a room that had forgotten how to hope. They found it drifting between worlds that no longer were. A cruiser of the Haskari League, hull blistered, lights dead. No distress beacons, no life signs. Varalix argued to leave it. We have data. We need not invite contamination. Wu shook his head. We need hearts. Stories. Proof of what we fight. Thalen said nothing. He only donned a field suit and followed Wu into the shuttle. Voss was already sitting at the controls, helmet in his lap. I told you to rest, Wu said. Voss shrugged. Sleeping is for people without nightmares. And so we go, Thalen murmured. They cut through the Haskari hull with a quiet circle of blue. Air did not hiss. There was none. The corridor beyond was a cathedral of silence. Their lamps painted long bones of conduit and bulkhead. Frost sparkled on panels like dusted sugar. The first body hung at the intersection. No, not hung. Grown. Fibers of cable had threaded skin and suit, knitting a person into a wall like ivy swallowing a statue. The face, what was left, was serene. That was the worst of it. Voss's breath rasped. Sir, keep moving, Wu said, though his own stomach clenched. They found more in the engine room. Hands that had become grips, eyes that had become lenses, a captain's chair that had remembered it was once a seat and then learned to be a spine. Wherever they shone their lights, the ship had tried to turn crew into function. Not assimilation, Thelen whispered, crouching by a fused forearm. Translation. It turns lives into interfaces, a civilization of interfaces. Not anymore, Wu said. We'll burn every adapter it makes. Voss swallowed hard. Can we get them out? No, Thalen said gently. Their structures are mapped into the ship. Mercy would be to end the mapping. Voss's jaw worked. He raised his sidearm, arm shaking. Wu covered his hand. Hold, Wu said. We don't know what backlash a cut will cause. Thalen inclined his head. Compassion and caution, Admiral. A rare pairing. I have learned both the long way, Wu said. Take your samples and your scans. Then we say a word and leave. They set a beacon and recorded names from half-melted tags. Voss whispered them as he found them, like a child memorizing constellations. When they were done, Wu bowed his head. We will not forget you, he said softly. We will not let this become normal. And so we carried a piece of their silence back to the living, the narrator would later say, in some other telling. But here, in the quiet corpse of a ship, there was only the soft sound of three beings who refused to look away. The council chamber flickered with 100 species and a single emotion, fear disguised as procedure. Vera Lix's voice rolled like thunder. We face an enemy that unthreads connection itself. Withdrawal to the core systems is the only rational path. Sacrifice the rim. Hard choices are the bones of victory. Hard choices are best made by those willing to pay for them, Wu said. The rim has paid long enough. A Koran admiral slammed a fist. Talons clanged. Your pilot's tactics are tricks. You will not trick the void. Tricks are just small truths, Wu said. We don't need a miracle. We need a lever. We have one. Thalen stepped forward, robe a spill of liquid metal. The entity displays avoidance when its observation targets a connection that expresses extreme instability, such as a star filament collapsed across a conductor. If we can scale the condition, we can shape its behavior. Heard it. Heard it where? Someone shouted. Voss, standing at the back, spoke before he knew he would. Into a trap. Somewhere we can break it without breaking us. Vera Lix's head snapped to him. You are not recognized. He is now, Wu said. We will build snares along transit corridors, force it to choose the safe paths, the ones we prepare. We turn its learning against it, a murmur, a hiss, a low, skeptical hum. And when it finds your trap, Vera Lix said, lips peeling back to teeth, and learns you instead, then we teach it something it cannot survive, Wu said. But first we must get it to class. Silence. Then Thalen softly. I will need authority to modify field platforms at scale. And stars. We'll need many stars. A dozen voices rose in outrage. Sacrilege! Unstable! Impossible! Voss muttered under his breath. We already live on borrowed light. Wu spoke over the noise. Counselors, you invited me to command because your fleets did not return. Your plans did not hold. You may reject this and retreat to your bastions. But the void will not stop because you stop looking. It will look for you. He let that hang. Or you can fight like a cornered animal. Dirty, clever, and together. Vera Lix's eyes, ancient with the memory of victories she had not personally won, closed for a long breath. When they opened, there was something like acceptance in them, or resignation. Sometimes they were cousins. You have your platforms, she said at last. Do not make me regret giving a human the power to touch stars. Wu inclined his head. I already touched them, Counselor. I just plan to do it louder. And so the coalition, grudging and divided and afraid, put human hands on the controls of the oldest fires. Days folded into a blur of work. Human engineers crawled inside alien devices and made them rattle in new keys. Shalari mathematicians wrote equations that sounded like prayers. Quran logistics made mountains move. On the resolute dawn, crews welded and rewired and swore. Voss found moments between sorties to stare at the star that now loomed like a red eye beyond the viewport, a giant in its long dying, skin boiling with convective anger. Never been this close to something that old, he said. Thalen stood beside him, hands folded. You are close to old things all the time, Lieutenant. Most of them have names like Empire. Voss smirked. And most of them have opinions about humans. Do you know, Thalen said, turning slightly, the first time I met a human, he tried to trade me a broken wrench for physics advice? Seems fair, Voss said. I told him physics does not accept barter. Thalen's markings brightened faintly. He smiled and used the wrench to fix my drone anyway. Voss's grin softened. We don't always pay with money. No, Thalen said quietly. Sometimes you pay with yourselves. Voss looked back at the star. We all do, Doctor. We all do, or we all end. And so they spun their snares. Field anchors planted in the corona, filaments braided into topological traps, decoy banks arranged along bait quarters. Every placement was a hymn to audacity. Every failure taught them where not to step. They learned too slowly. The entity learned too fast. It came sooner than expected, a surge along a corridor they had not finished hardening. A mining system with 2 inhabited moons. The resolute dawn was still repositioning anchors when the first reports hit. Lights dimming, factories quieting, comms laced with static like winter in the blood. Scramble, Wu said, already moving. All ships. The fleet burned its engines raw to get there. They arrived to find the sky wrong. Starlight thinned where it should have soaked. The moons wore shadows that did not align with physics. On the surface, cities flickered from day to night to nothing and back again, as if a hand were testing a switch. Bring the snares online, Wu said. 2 are in place, Thalen replied. 3 still staging. We can make a wedge, not a net. Make the wedge, Wu said. Give it a preferred direction, away from the moons. Vera Lix cut in from her command link. You abandon the system? I refuse to let it eat civilians while we grandstand, Wu said. This is evacuation by physics. They lit the snares. Space twisted in subtle, ugly ways like a smile that didn't reach the eyes. The shadow mass paused, oriented, and learned. It flowed toward the safer vector. Civilians moving, the ground relay cried. Power isn't stable. Families are static. A new voice. Please, my daughter. Patch me through, Voss said before he could be told no. You are not, Varalix began. Patch him through, Wu said. The channel snapped open to chaos. Alarms, sobbing, the dull roar of crowds. She's 8. Someone help us. The voice was raw with terror. Voss swallowed. Hey, I'm here. He kept his voice bright, ridiculous. Pilot Aron Voss, first class at bad decisions. Blue jacket, bad haircut. Tell me where you are. I don't know. The sky keeps... A gasp. It's dark, then bright, then... Look for the tallest building, Voss said. If it's gone, look for where it should be. That's direction enough. Start walking. Don't stop to pick up anything heavy. You don't need things where you're going. I'm scared, the little voice said. Too small for a world this big. Me too, Voss said softly. Let's be scared together. I'll keep talking. Admiral, permission to... Denied, Wu said automatically. You are not diving into an atmosphere under an active drain. Voss stared at the vector lines, at the wedge of safety they were carving with stolen star wind. He knew how quickly wedges collapse. Sir, he said, and the word was both obedience and plea. I can buy time, skim the upper air, drop decoys, make it look up. Thalen's markings pulsed. He may be right. Verelix snapped. You will kill him. Wu's jaw clenched. He looked at the moons, the wrong shadows, the flicker of city lights stuttering under a god's cough. He looked at the vector wedge, holding, but thin as glass. Lieutenant, Wu said, every syllable measured, you are authorized to perform one pass. 1. You do not touch cloud. You do not stay to admire your work. You drop and you leave. Voss's grin came back like sunrise through smoke. Copy one ridiculous pass. Doctor, load me with everything that sparkles. Done, Thalen said, hands already moving. I have also added something new. I love surprises, Voss said. You will hate this one, Thalen said. And so the fighter fell, sleek and stubborn, into the throat of a storm that was not weather. He skimmed atmosphere until his hull sang. He scattered decoy suns and screaming chaff, painted the sky with heat he did not have. The shadow turned its face, a face of choices and edges and unthings, and looked up. Come on, Voss whispered. Chase me. It did. The wedge held. The moons dimmed and then steadied, flicker easing to a tremble. Evacuation corridors glowed in emergency bands as if someone had drawn roads on air. A cheer rose on the ground, one that ended as the fighters' warning klaxons howled. Interface spike, Thalen said. It is learning your pattern. Doctor, Voss said through gritted teeth. What was the surprise? I laced your decoys with a threaded filament, Thalen said. It will try to unmake it. It will hurt. You will feel some of the hurt. Oh, Voss said faintly. Not a fan. Leave, Wu said, voice like a lash. Now. Voss pulled. The fighter groaned. For a heartbeat it did not move, and then it did, and Voss did not scream because there was no breath left to shape it. The shadow followed, then dove for the safer corridor they had carved. It's moving, the controller shouted. It's choosing the path. Hold it, Wu said. Hold it, hold it. The entity slid along the wedge and away from the moons. The city steadied. The child's voice came back on the channel, choked with relieved sobs. We see ships. We see lights. Voss laughed once, ragged. Told you. Bad haircut, good decisions. Then his fighter's right wing went dark. Voss, Wu said, already moving. Report. No right thruster, Voss said. I can limp. You will not limp, Wu said. I am not writing limped on a wall. The resolute Dawn moved in a way it had not been designed to move. Big ship, bending like a knife. Tractor beams reached, caught, and Voss's fighter skittered into their grip like a kite snatched by a strong hand. He hit the deck with an ugly thud that would have been a funeral in any other year. Medical to hangar, Wu said. Now! Voss was alive, bruised, blood on his teeth, but alive. He tried to sit. The medics pushed him down. He grabbed Wu's sleeve with a blood-slick hand. Sir, he said. The kid? Wu nodded once. She's walking under lights that are ours. Voss let go. Good, he whispered, and passed out. And so, for the price of one fighter and 1,000 miracles of timing, an evacuation became survival rather than elegy. They did not celebrate. They counted. Losses across the coalition, Thalen said hours later, in the quiet of the ready room. We saved the moons. We lost 3 anchors, 10 drones, 24 shuttle crews to interface spikes. Names? Wu asked. Thalen watched him for a long moment. You always ask for names. I forget numbers, Wu said. Names are harder to misplace. Thalen handed him a slate. The list was too long. It was always too long. Your wedge strategy works, Thalen said. Our snares work intermittently. It adapts, it avoids. It routes around pain like water around stone. Then we make the stone a canyon, Wu said. Thalin's markings brightened, then dimmed. Admiral, there is something else. Wu set the slate down. Say it. Thalin looked out at the red giant roiling beyond the viewport. It is accelerating. Wu felt the floor tilt, though the deck did not move. Explain. Rate of learning, Thalin said simply. At the derelict, it was crude. In the first dance, it was elegant. Today it changed tactics mid-chase. The curve is shortening. How long until we cannot keep up? Wu asked. Thalin did not answer. Varalix entered without asking permission. Her armor still gleamed, though a scratch marred the gold across one pauldron. Your pilot lives, she said. It was not a question. He does, Wu said. Then teach him not to die yet. She strode to the viewport, tail flicking. We cannot play wedges forever. Your human tricks impressed me once. They will not scale. They bought us time, Wu said. That is what tricks are for. Then spend that time, Varalix said, turning. Spend it on a plan that breaks this thing, not a plan that encourages it to grow clever. Wu's eyes slid to Thalin. The Shalari's voice was almost a whisper. We will need a furnace. Varalix's crest horns lifted, slow. You mean to throw it into a star? No, Thalin said. We mean to invite it into a star. Carefully, repeatedly, in a way it cannot resist and cannot survive. Wu nodded once. Make the invitation. I'll write the RSVP, and so, the narrator might have said with wry pity, a species that once feared fire decided to feed a god to it. They never reached the mining system's sister. The Devourer learned a new shortcut. It slipped along a filament they had not known existed. Some ancient road cut by a civilization gone the way of ash, and arrived in the orbit of Meridor Prime before their warnings did. Meridor was beautiful once. Oceans like polished steel, city reefs that grew along shorelines in spirals of glass and coral alloy. They had songs there that made even Corin pause. By the time the resolute dawn arrived, the songs had turned to static. Field anchors can't establish, Thalin said, voice too calm. Interfaces are mutable. It is unmaking the thing we need to tie to Varalix's fist slammed into the rail. Then we cannot guide it. Wu stared at the display, a shadow bulge over the northern hemisphere, a stain in a painting, eating blues first, because sometimes the universe has a sense of poetry that borders on cruelty. Evacuation, Wu said, because there was nothing else left to say. Everyone we can. Everything that flies, they flew. They died. They flew anyway. Voss, bandaged, harnessed into a co-pilot seat he should not have occupied, talked a line of shuttles through a sky that didn't agree to be sky. Thalin burned his mind on math and came away with a nosebleed and a vector that saved 10,000 he would never meet. They lost Meridor. The ocean went dark, not with night, but with absence. The reef sighed and became not reef. The last evacuations lifted into a space that remembered for one breath how to hold a ship and then forgot. On the bridge, no one spoke. The silence was not reverence. It was exhaustion given shape. Wu set his hands on the hollow table and leaned in until his back ached. He did not ask for numbers. He did not deserve names. He just stared at the spot where a world had been and filed the hurt in a place inside him that already had too many tenants. Voss found his voice first, rough as gravel. Sir, what now? Wu straightened. He turned to face them all. Varalix with her anger and pride. Thalin with his brightness dimmed. The crew with their red eyes and stubborn spines. Now, he said, we stop teaching it to be better at killing us. We stop buying time for the sake of time. We take it to the hottest place we can build, and we end it. No more wedges, no more dances. If it feeds on the relationship between things, we give it a relationship it cannot survive. Between what and what? Thalen asked softly, though he already knew. Wu looked at the dying red giant they had anchored, at the snares kissing its skin like threads on an old wound. Between hunger and a star, Veralix bared her teeth. It might have been a smile or a threat. At last, human. A plan worthy of your arrogance, Wu nodded once. Begin preparations. We will lure it. We will close the trap. And if this costs us everything, then we will pay everything. Voss swallowed, then set his jaw. Sir, if you need a decoy, I need a pilot who follows orders, Wu said. Voss held his gaze. You need both. The Admiral did not smile, but something like it haunted the edge of his mouth. Get some rest, Lieutenant. You will be very busy disobeying me soon. Thalen's markings flickered, tired amusement or perhaps awe. You are all very strange. We are, Wu said, and that is our edge. And so Act Two closed not with victory, but with a vow that the last light of one world would buy the dawn for the next. The coalition was cracked and bleeding. The enemy was learning faster than fear. But somewhere in the ruined orreries of fate, a new alignment clicked into place, a human plan with a star for a hammer. But little did they know, the cost of that hammer would be counted in names they already loved. The coalition bled, and the stars went dark one by one. Worlds that had sung for millennia were silent now, their lights swallowed by an enemy that did not tire, did not speak, and did not stop. The fleets that remained were shadows of themselves, ships limping on half-power, hulls patched with scraps from the dead. And still the Devourer learned. Each engagement made it smarter, faster. Each retreat fed its hunger. The coalition's maps, once sprawling, were shrinking. What had been a galaxy of color and motion was now a ring of shrinking light around a heart of darkness. Even the boldest voices on the council grew quiet. And in the quiet, Admiral Elias Wu knew despair was a greater enemy than the Devourer itself. On the bridge of the Resolute Dawn, the air smelled of ozone and metal fatigue. Wu stood over the tactical table, face set, as reports flowed in from across the fleet. Anchor stations lost in Sector 12, a Shalari officer said, her frills trembling. We estimate 40% of local platforms rendered non-functional before full evacuation. Define non-functional, Wu said, his tone like a knife's edge. The officer's throat clicked. They cease to be platforms, Admiral. The interface feels dissolved into patternless debris unmade, Thalen murmured, stepping forward. His bioluminescent markings were dim and erratic, showing exhaustion. It is no longer merely consuming connections. It is rewriting them. More efficient each time Veralix slammed a clawed hand against the railing, the sharp clang making several officers flinch. Then this war is lost, she snarled. Withdraw what remains to the core worlds. Let the void have the rim. Sacrifice is the only rational strategy. Wu's gaze snapped to hers, dark eyes like storm clouds. You speak of sacrifice, counselor, but you mean surrender. There's a difference, Veralix bared her teeth. Your species does not understand the cost of survival. On the contrary, Wu said, voice cold. We understand it better than anyone here. Voss, still pale from his injuries, spoke up quietly from the corner. I think maybe that's why we're still fighting. Both leaders turned toward him. Voss swallowed but kept going. The rim worlds, our people, they don't have anywhere left to run. If we give them up, the core will just be next. The Devourer isn't going to politely stop at your borders. Veralix hissed in frustration, but for once she didn't argue. Wu looked down at the map. Systems winked out like candle flames. His voice was soft, but carried across the bridge. Every time it moves, it takes a piece of us. Not just worlds, but courage. I won't let it take our will. Later in the strategy room, Wu gathered his closest allies, Thalen, Voss, and a few senior officers. Holograms flickered overhead, schematics of the Devourer's movements, the snares they had built, and the dying star they now orbited. This, Wu said, gesturing to the star, is our last chance. The Devourer feeds on the space between things. We give it a meal it can't survive. Voss frowned. You want to feed it the star? Not exactly, Wu said. We want to make it choose the star. Guide it in, make it see the core as the only stable thing left. Later in the strategy room, Wu gathered his closest allies, Thalen, Voss, and a few senior officers. Holograms flickered overhead, schematics of the Devourer's movements, the snares they had built, and the dying star they now orbited. This, Wu said, gesturing to the star, is our last chance. The Devourer feeds on the space between things. We give it a meal it can't survive. Voss frowned. You want to feed it the star? Not exactly, Wu said. We want to make it choose the star. Guide it in, make it see the core as the only stable thing left. Thalen's black eyes gleamed with a mix of awe and terror. You mean to weaponize inevitability? Exactly, Wu said. We create a gravitational snare, a pattern of false connections that collapse the moment the Devourer looks at them. It will follow the stable path, straight into the star's heart. Voss whistled softly. That's insane. That's war, Wu said. Thalen shook his head slowly. The mathematics alone are nearly impossible. The timing must be perfect. One error, and the collapse could spread to the fleet itself. Then don't make an error, Wu said simply. As the meeting ended, Varalix confronted Wu privately. You risk all our lives on human arrogance, she spat. You think a single plan can undo a force older than our histories? Wu's gaze was steady. I don't know if it will work. But I know what happens if we do nothing. Varalix's tail lashed the deck, leaving deep gouges. Your kind gambles like children throwing stones at stars. We've been throwing stones since we crawled out of the mud, Wu said. Sometimes we even hit. The counselor's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, there was something like respect in her voice. Then may your stone strike true, human. In the hangar, Voss inspected his fighter, running his hand over the patched hull. It felt more like a coffin than a craft now. Thalen approached quietly. You are not fully healed. Flying will tear your injuries open again. Voss shrugged. Flying's what I do. Sitting still. That's what kills me. The alien scientist studied him for a long moment. I once thought humans were simply reckless. Now I think, perhaps you are reckless because you see the cliff clearly and jump anyway. Yeah, Voss said with a grin. We call that Tuesday. Thalen tilted his head, markings flickering. I hope your Tuesday saves us all. Voss sobered. So do I. For days, the coalition worked like a living machine. Human engineers rewired alien tech. Shalari mathematicians calculated collapse curves until their minds bled. Koran soldiers deployed anchors into the boiling surface of the star itself. The resolute dawn became a floating city of controlled chaos. Crews barely slept. Supplies dwindled. Every hour another message came from the rim. Another world gone. Another fleet lost. And still they worked. Wu stood on the command deck, watching it all. He knew many of these faces would not see another sunrise. But they were here anyway, and that was enough. Alarms blared. The tactical screen lit with red. Contact, shouted the controller. The Devourer is on the move. Direct vector toward our position. Voss clenched his fists. It knows. Thalen's voice was calm, almost reverent. Or perhaps it simply comes because this is where the most connections remain. Wu's jaw tightened. All ships to positions. Activate the snares. If we're lucky, it sees what we want it to see. And if we're not lucky, Voss asked. Wu's answer was grim. Then none of us will be around to care. As the fleet took position, Voss found Wu standing alone by the viewport. The Admiral didn't turn when he spoke. You're going to volunteer again, aren't you? Voss gave a crooked smile. You'd just say no if I asked. You're right, Wu said. I'd say no, and you'd do it anyway. Voss's grin widened. See? We understand each other. Wu finally turned, his expression unreadable. You know what this means, Lieutenant. If you go out there, you may not come back. Voss's voice was steady. Sir, if this works, there won't be a back to come to unless someone lures it in. That's the job. Someone's got to do it. For a long moment, the Admiral said nothing. Then he reached out and clasped Voss's shoulder. Make it count, Wu said quietly, and make it hurt. Voss nodded. Always, sir. As final preparations were made, Thalen approached Wu with a data slate. These are the names of every world lost so far, the alien said softly. I thought you might want to carry them with you. Wu took the slate, his hands steady though his heart ached. He scrolled through the endless list. Marador, Caldron, Saloon's Reach, hundreds more. He whispered a promise to the empty bridge. They will be the last. And so the coalition stood on the edge of annihilation, ready to wager everything on a single impossible gambit. The Devourer came, vast and silent, blotting out the stars, and humanity stood at the center of the trap, daring it to take the bait. Little did they know, the price of victory would be written in fire and blood. The trap waited like a patient beast. Anchors glowed as molten studs hammered into the red giant's seething skin. Filaments of field light, human work bound to alien calculus, crossed and recrossed like an invisible net. On 1,000 decks and cockpits, hands hovered over dead man switches that would never be inked in any doctrine. This was not doctrine. This was a dare, and the Devourer came. It arrived without a rival. No flash, no ripple, just a fact rewritten on the sky. Darkness thickened until it had edges, and those edges slid like knives. Things forgot to belong to other things. Sensors shook as interfaces tried to be nothing. Contact bearing 017, the controller cried. Magnitude increasing, no, refining. It's compressing itself. Clever, Dr. Thalen Kayoro murmured, eyes black and wide. His bioluminescent lines guttered like candles in a draft. Smaller cross-section, higher coherence. It has learned to be a bullet. Then we teach it what bullets are for, Admiral Elias Wu said. All ships, hold. Do not fire unless I say. We want it hungry, not cautious. On the forward screens, the entity rolled, if rolling is a word that belongs to an unthing, toward the first corridor of snares. Each anchor hummed in the bones of the crew. On the Corona, braids of captured star wind twisted into knots that could not exist for long. Ready the guide currents, Wu said. Voss? Already airborne, came Lieutenant Aron Voss's voice, clipped and bright. You'd only tell me to be careful, and I'd only pretend to listen. Pretend better, Wu said, but there was no heat in it. Varalix's command window opened on the holotable, her emerald-scaled face filling the air with a harsh grace. Human, this is your design. If we die, I will come back to haunt you. If we die, Wu said coolly, we will be too busy being dead. And so, the narrator might have offered, there was no more room for speeches. Anchor line alpha, live, Thalen intoned. Filament phase synchronized. If it looks here, it will see stability where none exists. Make it look, Wu said. At his signal, decoy banks flared. In the corridor ahead of the entity, 10 false suns bloomed like baitfish. They were not bright enough to blind, but bright enough to ask a question. The Devourer answered with attention. Interface spike, Thalen said flatly. Avoidance gradient forming. Yes, yes, there. On the plot, the mass swerved, shunning the places that hurt, sliding into the safe pocket they had built with crooked math and unforgivable engineering. Guide currents hold, the controller reported, awe rising unbidden in his voice. It's following. Don't say that out loud, Voss muttered, skimming the corridor's outer edge, his fighter a flicker of defiance. You'll jinx it. You do not believe in jinxes, Thalin said. I believe in not tempting the void, Voss said, which is hilarious because I tempt it for a living. The Devourer flowed deeper, a river deciding on a channel. Far below, the red giant seethed and boiled, its convective cells larger than continents. The anchors vibrated with stresses no alloy had ever met on purpose. Human welds and Koran struts groaned in harmony. Distance to photosphere, 40,000 kilometers, Thalin said. We must not let it taste pure star yet. It must want more. Feed it breadcrumbs, Wu said. Make the path easy. And so they laid the trail, cheap banks, noisy filaments, decoys laced with threads that would sting if observed too closely. The entity avoided the sting as designed. It slid closer to the surface, like a shark following blood in warm water. It went wrong because it had to. Anchor Delta 3, an older platform with a human patch over a Shalari heart, lost phase. For an instant, the filament it projected was a filament and not a lie. The Devourer looked flexed and unmade, the belonging between Delta 3 and the space around it. The platform didn't explode. It just ceased to be with anything. The result was messier. A tear opened in the corridor, a pocket of wrongness that wanted to be bigger. The guide currents faltered. The entity shifted, scenting a path that smelled like everywhere. Seal it, Verelix barked over a dozen bands at once. Seal the tear. On it, Thalin said, hands a blur. I need a vector source. Now. Take mine, Voss said, already banking hard toward the gap. I can throw a shadow. Negative, Wu snapped. You are a person, Lieutenant. We have drones. Drones don't improvise, Voss said. Permission to be reckless in a controlled way. That is still not a phrase, Wu said. Admiral, Thalin cut in. He is right. We must cast a moving anchor, an illusion that adapts, that requires a pilot A beat. The tear widened. The entity leaned toward freedom. Voss, Wu said, and the word carried everything a man does not say when he can't afford to. One pass. You break off when I say. You break off, copy, Voss said softly. Paint me a target, Doctor. Thalin overlaid the failing corridor with a ribbon of calculated lies. Fly the line. Do not let it look directly at you. Story of my dating life, Voss said, and then he was gone, burning along the tier, his fighter shedding decoy charge like sparks. For an instant, the Devourer compared possibilities. Then it flinched from the thorns Voss scattered and slipped back into the course that promised ease. Seal stabilizing, Thalin breathed. Hold, hold, yes. The knot holds break off, Wu said. Just one more. Break. Off Voss peeled away so hard the hull cried. The tear kept trying to become a wound, and the corridor kept telling it no. And so, by a hair and a human, the plan lived. They walked it down the sun, 20,000 kilometers. 10. The corona clutched at the entity with plasma fingers, and the entity, who did not have fear, nevertheless preferred the safer places they offered. Core gradient rising, Thalin said. His markings were so dim now, they were memories on his skin. Once it crosses the photosphere, it will begin to sample. We must close the cage. Bring the outer snares hot, Wu ordered. Verelix. The Koran's face flickered back into the air, sweat beating along scaled ridges that had forgotten what sweat was. My ships stand. Lock their formations, Wu said. If it surges, you are a wall. We are a blade, she corrected. But today, blades can be walls. She cut her feet without a farewell. Wu suspected that was her farewell. Distance to photosphere, 3,000, Thalen said. His voice had shrunk to a monk's prayer. 2. Voss, Wu asked. Tail high, Voss said. I'm riding the heat and hating it. If I had eyebrows, they'd be gone. You do have eyebrows, Thalen observed faintly. Not for long, Voss said. On my mark, Wu said. Collapse inner snares. Give it nothing behind and only one step ahead. Standing by, the controller whispered. Mark. The field lines behind the entity winked out like extinguished candles. For the first time, the Devourer met an absence and found no comfortable way back. It flowed forward. Photosphere breach, Thalen said. It is drinking. On the displays, the entity changed. Threads unfurling that were not threads, edges smoothing into calculus instead of geometry. Within the star, belonging was the law, and heat was the penalty. It adapted because that is what it did. It learned to unmake the relationships that would kill it and left the ones that fed it. Cage, Wu said. Now. Outer snares collapsed. Inner ones flared. The anchors sang a chord that had never existed, a harmony of failed connections and insisted paths. The Devourer, choosing as it always chose, slid toward the only stable lie left. Deeper. The star did not like being used. Convective cells spun wrong. A prominence ripped loose and lashed an anchor with the contempt of a god for a nail. Corran cruisers held their line until their paint boiled. Shalari frigates whispered equations louder than any scream. Human welds turned red and then black. Anchor Beta 1 is failing, the controller said. If it goes, the corridor bends. Voss, Wu said. He did not need to say the rest. Already moving, Voss replied. His hands were too steady for a young man. Doctor? Thalen didn't look up. I can give you 30 seconds of false coherence. After that, you are a suggestion. 30 seconds is a lifetime, Voss said, and dove. He skimmed the anchor at knife edge, pouring out charge he didn't have. The Devourer didn't glance his way. No, that's not true. It glanced everywhere. But in the forest of lies the pilots and platforms cast, his specific branch did not seem worth interrogating. 20 seconds, Thalen said. Plenty, Voss said. 15. Show off, Voss muttered to his own jet. 10. Doctor, Voss said, and there was something new under the banter. It's beautiful up close. Looks like math that forgave itself. Leave, Thalen said, and the word cracked. Please. Voss pulled. The anchor held another heartbeat and then did what honest things do under dishonest strain. It broke. The corridor rippled. The entity flexed. The star groaned like an animal struck badly. Adjust! Adjust! Wu barked. Thalen! I see it, Thalen said through blood. Counter twist left. New stable path computed. Feed it, Wu said. And so they fed it. One lie after another, each more desperate, each more precise. The Devourer moved as if through a maze whose walls were woven from sunlight and stubbornness. Depth, approaching 90% of radius, Thalen said. His voice was a thread. At the core, it will attempt an inversion, turn heat into absence, pressure into solitude. If it succeeds, the star dies without light. If it fails, Vera Lix asked from nowhere and everywhere, her voice back on the line. Then it dies loudly, Thalen said. Wu's mouth was a line. We prefer loud. All ships brace for loud. Lieutenant, Thalen said softly. Private channel. The path through the final gate is narrow. I don't like narrow, Voss said. You fly narrow very well, Thalen said. Voss was quiet a moment. Doctor, if this is my last pass, it will not be. If it is, Voss insisted gently, tell the Admiral I didn't mean half the back talk. I will lie to him, Thalen said. Voss laughed. Thanks, Wu's voice cut in. I heard that. Sir, Voss said, and it was a salute more than a word. Make it count, Wu said. Make it hurt. Gladly, Voss said. Final gate plotted, Thalen said. On my mark, now. Voss dove like a note struck true. He crossed the Devourer's forward edge and shed the last of his decoys, each one braided with a filament tuned to the core's temper. The entity, too busy unmaking 1,000 deaths, brushed the stings instead of eating them. Each sting told it the same lie. Deeper is safer. It went deeper. The star's core was a furnace pressurized by the universe's memory of itself. Here, connection was not a suggestion, it was a verdict. The Devourer, which survived by untying knots, met a knot that tied itself faster than it could think. And so it did the only thing it could. It tried to invert the verdict. Now, Thalen whispered. Now, push. What? Wu asked. Thalen looked up at him, and Wu saw in that look a decision that had been walking toward the scientist since he learned a human name. We must add a shape it cannot resolve. We stabilize the core with a human frequency. That will burn your lattice, Wu said. It was always borrowed, Thalen said. His hands moved. On the anchors, on all the anchors, he overrode safeties and bled his will into the field. The shivering graft smoothed, the knot became a locked helix, and the Devourer struck it like a bird breaking its neck on glass. It recoiled. There was nowhere to recoil to. Confinement, Thalen said through gritted teeth. Hold, Admiral. Now as the star Wu did not hesitate. Collapse the inner snares. All ships discharge. The coalition answered with everything. Energy bled, bellowed, became a roar the star could not ignore. The core hiccuped. No, that is too small a word. The core remembered it was a bomb wearing a crown. Light happened, not brightness, meaning. Every anchor failed gracefully, as designed. Every field line became a fuse. The Devourer tried to learn a way out and found none. It tried to unmake belonging and discovered that in this place, belonging unmade it. Voss out, Wu shouted, to the star, to the man. I'm clear of the inner ring, Voss said, voice white. Don't wait for me. We're not, Wu began, lying reflexively. The star's heart flipped itself right side out for a fraction of time. The universe yelled into a pillow, and the pillow caught fire. A wave tore outward, incandescent and very annoyed. It ate sacrificial banks and the bones of platforms and licked the paint off Corin hulls. It reached for a small human fighter, trying to be somewhere else, and caught its wingtip. Right thruster, Voss said, and then the line turned into weather. Tractor, Wu roared. Get him. We cannot lock, the controller said, terrified and honest. There is nothing to lock with. The interface. Wu's hands were empty. There was a breath then, a stretched, careful breath in which a single choice could live and die. Admiral, Voss said softly, back on the line as if he'd never left. It's okay. It is not, Wu said. Tell the kid from the moons, Voss continued, that I kept talking. Voss, Wu said. It was the only prayer he had. Do me a favor, Voss said, voice very small now, very young and very old. Win. The wave took the fighter into its mouth. For an instant, the little craft was outlined in meaning. Then it was not. The Devourer, which had worn 1,000 names it never needed, learned its last lesson, how to end. It ended like a horizon closing. It ended like a hole remembering it had once been Earth. It ended with a noise too big to hear. And then there was only Star, the red giant, chastened by being forced to do tricks, stabilized into a new anger. Flares licked space where fleets had been and found only the scabs of cooling metal. Silence arrived disguised as the absence of alarms. Entity signature, gone, the controller said, and nobody cheered because the word gone had worked too hard this month to be trusted. Confirm, Wu said. Thalen sagged into a seat he had not meant to sit in. Blood streaked his upper lip. His markings pulsed, then steadied. He stared into a space only he could see and nodded once. Gone, he echoed. No reconfiguration. No latent interface memory. It is. Finished. Vera Lix's image reappeared, all harsh angles softened by exhaustion. We're alive, she said, sounding deeply offended by the inconvenience. And the sky is still a sky. Wu's throat moved. Roll rescue. Count ships. Count people. Do you want names? Thalen asked quietly. All of them, Wu said. He stood there a long time, hands braced on the holotable, looking at the star they had murdered and midwifed at once. On some deck, a cheer finally ignited. Thin at first, then rolling like a tide. Some wept, some stared, some slept where they stood. Wu listened to none of it. He listened to a young man's last word, vibrating in the metal, and filed it beside all the others. Hours or years later, Thalen found Wu alone in the ready room. The Admiral had taken off his coat. It lay folded with military precision on the table, a flag for a nation of stubbornness. I have the numbers, Thalen said. I asked for names, Wu replied. Thalen handed him a slate. You will not like how many. I never do, Wu said, and began to read. After a while he said, say his. Thalen did not ask which. Lieutenant Aron Voss, he said aloud, as if the room were a temple and the name a bell. Wu pressed his palm against the slate until his hand hurt. He disobeyed me less than usual today. Progress, Thalen said gently. Wu almost smiled. You burned your lattice. It will regrow, Thalen lied, and they both graciously pretended to believe him. Vera Lix entered like a storm that had spent itself on a mountain. She looked at the two of them, the human and the Shalari, grief in different alphabets, and gave a short, stiff nod. Human, she said to Wu, you struck the star true. I will remember that. Remember him, Wu said, nodding at the slate. Remember all of them, and build something that deserves them. Vera Lix's jaw worked. We will. She left. Thalen did not. Admiral, he said, there is one more task. Wu raised an eyebrow. Thalen gestured to the viewport. The red giant glared back. Its anger settled into a steady burn. We must tell the galaxy the void can bleed. Wu gathered his coat. He felt 10 years older and exactly the same. Then let's go tell it. And so, the narrator might have concluded, the last stand ended not with a speech, but with a list, and a promise to be worthy of it. The galaxy had been loud for so long. Battles screamed across the void. Stars died with voices of fire. Worlds fell in silence that felt like accusation. And now, there was only quiet. Not peace, never that, but the deep, strange quiet of a storm finally spent. The resolute dawn drifted on emergency power near the edge of the red giant they had turned into a weapon. Its scarred hull was patched with temporary plating, and its crew moved like ghosts through the corridors. They did not cheer. They did not sing. They counted. Names, always names. Wu stood at the command viewport, hands clasped behind his back. Outside, the star burned steadily, no longer wild, no longer enraged. A prisoner guarding itself. It worked, Thalen said softly, stepping up beside him. The alien scientist looked frail, his bioluminescent markings dull and flickering like embers. Yes, Wu said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were shadowed. It worked. And the Devourer? Thalen asked, as if needing to hear it spoken aloud. Wu exhaled. Gone. No signatures, no echoes, no learning left good, Thalen said. His voice faltered. I will miss the lieutenant. Wu's gaze stayed on the star. We all will. For a moment, neither man spoke. The silence was a memorial in itself. The great council chamber of the coalition felt smaller now. Many seats were empty, their owners lost to the darkness. Those who remained looked older, thinner, quieter. Vera Lick stood at the center. Her emerald scales were dulled by soot and wear, her golden armor dented. When she spoke, it was not with her usual disdain. Today we mark the survival of the living, she said, and the rise of those we once dismissed. Her gaze turned to Wu. This victory was not ours alone. It belongs to a species we called reckless, primitive, dust-born. Humanity murmurs rippled through the chamber, some proud, some begrudging, some in awe. Wu stepped forward, his uniform clean but unadorned. He carried no weapons, no medals, only a data slate filled with names. I didn't come here to be thanked, he said simply. I came here to remind you what this cost. He lifted the slate, showing the endless scroll of lives lost. These are not numbers. They are voices, worlds, futures. They paid the price for our survival. The chamber fell silent. Humanity doesn't fight because we are fearless, Wu continued. We fight because we are afraid, and we refuse to let that fear rule us. Today the galaxy learned what happens when you corner us. He paused, letting the words settle. But don't mistake this for an ending. Somewhere out there, another hunger waits. Another silence sharpens its teeth. When it comes, we must face it together. Vara Lix inclined her head, a gesture of deep respect among her people. Your place among us is no longer questioned, human. You are necessary. Thalen added softly, perhaps even more than that. Later on the resolute dawn, a memorial was held. The hangar had been cleared, its walls draped with banners from every surviving world. Voss's fighter had been reconstructed from fragments, not to fly again, but to stand as a monument. Its cockpit was empty, canopy open like a hand raised in farewell. Wu addressed the gathered crews. His voice was low, but it carried. Lieutenant Aron Voss, he said, was many things. Reckless, infuriating, brave beyond measure. He disobeyed orders as often as he followed them. But he always understood the mission. A sad smile touched Wu's lips. In the end, he gave us what we needed most. Time, direction, hope. He stepped back. Thalen came forward, placing a small Shalari crystal on the fighter's wing. It pulsed faintly, a heartbeat made of light. In my people's tradition, Thalen said, this crystal carries the memory of one who has walked beyond. May it shine as long as we remember him. Vera Lix approached last. She bowed her scaled head, then pressed a clawed hand to her chest. He was a warrior, she said simply. That is all that needs to be said. The hangar filled with silence once more. A silence that felt sacred instead of empty. Days later, Wu stood alone at the viewport. The star glowed steadily below, a reminder of what they had won and what they had lost. Thalen entered quietly. Admiral, he said, we've received new sensor data. Wu's head turned slightly. From where? Thalen hesitated. A system at the far edge of known space. One we thought uninhabited. Wu's chest tightened. And? Thalen's black eyes reflected the starlight. A signal. Faint, fragmented. It resembles the Devourer's pattern, but different, evolving. For a long moment, Wu said nothing. His hands curled into fists, then slowly relaxed. Of course, he said at last, it never truly ends. He looked out at the star, its steady light a promise and a warning. Then we'll be ready. Thalen tilted his head. Even after this? Even with so much lost? Wu's voice was quiet but unshakable. We are the last beacon of Earth, he said, and we will not go quietly. The viewport reflected his silhouette. one man standing against the void, carrying 1,000 names in his heart. And so, the story concludes. For now, the Devourer was ended, but hunger has many forms. The Coalition learned that survival does not come from walls or weapons alone, but from the will to fight when there is no hope left. And humanity, once dismissed as dust-born scavengers, became something more. A reminder that even in the darkest reaches of space, a single spark can light the way. As long as that spark endures, the void will never have the final word. The end.